Yeah, and beyond just Tesla, you follow other manufacturers very closely as well. You were just tweeting extensively about the quarter one results for Ford.
Yeah.
So the transition to electrification is and will be a long journey. And some people are predicting 2030, the crossover point 2028, 2035. There's a lot of regulation where you're no longer going to be able to buy an internal combustion engine vehicle in, I think, 5 or 6 states in the United States. So can you give me your opinion, your general opinion on where we're at in this transition? Will it accelerate? And what are the economic headwinds for some of these OEMs based on Ford's quarter one results for Model E?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny you ask that question because I actually rely on Monroe quite a bit to get a really good understanding of how sort of the challenges are from an engineering and manufacturing perspective for these OEMs. You guys do such a great job bringing that to light for the public through your videos and your expertise. I think, sort of my opinion is that I think there are certain OEMs and legacy automakers that are more ahead of the game than others. I think folks like Ford, the Hyundai Group with Hyundai and Kia, maybe even Volkswagen with their ID4 and sort of the amount of EVs they're selling globally. These are some of the automakers that stand out to me that seem to be a little bit further ahead of the game versus everybody else, like a Ram, for example, or a Jeep Chrysler. That's very, I don't think they're making EVs at all. They have some in the pipeline to produce in 2024, but they're not really making any. GM just discontinued its most affordable model in the Bolt, and if you sort of strip that out of their 2023 sales, they've only really sold 1,000 EVs in the first quarter between the Lyriq and the Hummer EV. And so there is a transitional phase that the legacy automakers are going to have to go through that is very reminiscent of a book called The Innovator's Dilemma, which is sort of this story arc that says folks that are, or companies that are well entrenched in a technology that has been around for a long time are going to have a very difficult time transitioning to a new technology if a disruptor comes to play that is able to outmaneuver them from the perspective of technology and scale and how quickly they can move. And so, the whole thing is going to be, how can traditional OEMs sort of wind down their gas car business as the EV transition takes hold, while ramping up a EV business that's going to be unprofitable for years to come. And we saw this in Ford's quarter one earnings for 2023, ever since they broke out their electric vehicle segment, their Pro segment, which is the commercial, and the Blue segment, which is the gas car business. This is something Ford did that was super brave, and Jim Farley deserves a ton of credit, and that leadership team deserves a lot of credit to sort of lead that effort. But we see firsthand, first quarter of 2023, Ford's EV margins were negative 102%, and they sold 12,000 units in the first quarter. Now, a lot of that was through planned shutdowns in the factory for Mach-E and some of the diagnosing they had to do around the F-150 Lightning battery fire that they had in their plant, which was the right thing to do. But it really highlights just because an automaker has been making gas cars forever doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have an easier path to growing their EV business in relation to a newcomer, like, say, a Tesla, who sort of had to endure 10 plus years from inception of a grueling scaling process to be able to offer mass market affordable EVs at a profit. And if you sort of put their progress side by side with a Ford or a GM or any other player, it seems like these companies might be maybe 5 to 10 years behind where Tesla is, on sort of that path. Maybe some even haven't even started yet. And so the question becomes, with a dealership network that doesn't really seem to like to sell EVs because they don't have as much maintenance, and they're not really incentivized to sell something that won't make them money in the long term with maintenance. And sort of the UAW, which is the United Auto Workers Union, that just yesterday came out sort of not in favor of some of the EV incentives that the U.S. government has put in place, which I think is just sort of they're haggling a little bit for the renegotiation stuff that's going to happen this year. But you can kind of see there's blockades. The legacy automakers have to navigate that complicated sort of variable of the UAW and the dealership network, in addition to ramp up an EV segment that's going to be very difficult and requires a lot of innovation and pace. And so, I think there's a real concern, and I think Sandy and you have painted sort of, what could happen if legacy automakers don't jump on this EV wagon as quickly as possible and as profitably as possible, that a lot of them could be in really big trouble. And I think we're starting to see some of the beginning stuff starting to happen, at least in that journey, with an example like Ford and their Model E business. But, there's a lot to be seen. I think one thing is for sure is that the EV adoption is accelerating, and automakers will need to jump on that train. They have no other choice. They literally have no other choice, because if they don't, that basically means a shrinking business that will be a fraction of what they used to be, and in a worst case scenario, they won't exist. And I don't think any of us want that.
Yeah. When we talked a while back, I think it was on your podcast, I mentioned how Apple phones, so the iPhone, the introduction of the iPhone rocked the cell phone world and essentially put Nokia and Motorola nearly out of business because they got rid of all the buttons. It was a complete change in how a phone was used by a human being. And really, that's what everybody has today. It's quite incredible. I think the culture and the passionate fan base, I wouldn't even call it fan base, the passionate following of Tesla as a brand is incredible. And if another OEM made a vehicle with the exact same stats as a Model Y, same size, same shape, same storage, same range, same everything, but it was a Chevy. Let's just say it's a Chevrolet Model 3.5. I don't know, something. It's literally identical. Would it outsell a Model Y? I don't think so, because you don't have that the way that you buy the vehicle online. They would still use their dealership network. I feel like it's beyond the product itself, and it's the culture surrounding the brand and what's built up behind Tesla. So what's your thought on that fervent following of Tesla as a brand and how that's kind of blasting through into the future?
I think that's a great point. It's a great point that's sort of underestimated by folks that might be viewing the Tesla dynamic and the EV transition sort of at a surface level. There's definitely something to be said there. I think Tesla benefits tremendously from having somebody like an Elon Musk at the helm that is very good at creating passion and excitement about technological feats and about the future. Very Steve Jobs in a way. It's sort of a visionary leader that just makes a lot of people excited. I think that's even with his quirks and his sort of weaknesses from a public speaking perspective, the dude just makes you excited to think about the future, and he does a really good job. He needs to be commended for that, for sure. But I do think there's something about the Tesla brand itself that does inspire people to want to support the company more than, say, like a GM or a Ford customer would. I think there is definitely something to be said for your lifelong F-150 buyers or your Silverado buyers. We all know the acronyms that people have come up with for, Ford, fix or repair daily, and Chevys have another one or something. And I'm not speaking about the reliability. I just know that's sort of the culture that lives there. But the Tesla story has this long-term vision of transitioning the world towards a sustainable future with what seems like a leader in Elon Musk that really cares about that mission himself and is sort of leading that from the front. I think the fact that there's so much coverage about his work ethic and his passion really helps strengthen the brand, and it's really proved by the fact that the car like the Tesla Model Y in the United States for the first quarter of 2023, it was the best-selling non-pickup truck period in the United States with zero advertising. It sold something like 85,000 units, I forget, in the US in the first quarter, and the RAV4 sold maybe 1,000 less. But just think about that dynamic for a second. You have a car that doesn't or a company that doesn't advertise in the United States selling a car that averages around $50,000 per car. That's an electric vehicle only from Tesla and tied to this Elon Musk character. outselling the Toyota RAV4 that has a reputation for being extremely affordable and reliable and safe. So, and that speaks to that support. That speaks to that support. And they will continue. I think that support will continue to pull Tesla through the rest of the decade as they release their Cybertruck and their compact car. And it's something that no other company has. Other companies, in my opinion, would have to make up that very passionate fan base by offering ridiculously good products that hopefully they can make money on. But that's a tall order. And it's, we'll see if other companies can get there, especially legacy automakers. But it's going to be hard, man. It's going to be hard. You don't get to almost 2 million cars per year at the current rate in 2023 with zero advertising, with your average selling prices being around $45,000 to $50,000 without something special. And I think Tesla has that it factor that no other car maker has.
Yeah, and I was looking at a chart, looking at how much profit Tesla made last year. I believe it was a $12 or $13 billion in profit on $75 billion of revenue. And you have Toyota and VW, which are about $250 billion in revenue, but much smaller percentage of profit. And it's incredible to think that that's going to grow again, where they'll probably be over $100 billion in revenue this year. I don't know the math, 2 million. Yeah. 2 million vehicles.
Pretty close.
Yeah. And if they keep their profit margin above 13, 14, 15%, because they were at 16% last year, that's a tremendous amount of profit. Now you're making almost as much profit in total dollars as some of these big behemoths because they're so profitable. And it's quite incredible to think that in 2018 and 19, they were really struggling to ramp up any meaningful production on the Model 3 alone, and now they have the 3 and the Y.